Hello.
Hi everyone.
Although they can't
Hope
speak
you.
back to us.
No, you can't. You can't speak back. You could have waved, but I'm happy for you to have your cameras off if you've got a brew. Hopefully you've got a brew. It's absolutely freezing out there. But obviously the cameras. Oh hi. The cameras are on if you want to put them on, like I said, but we have muted you from a microphone point of view. So if you've got any questions or anything, just put them in the chat for us. But welcome to today's webinar on the Christmas Party Survival Guide. So I'm Liz Chiver. I'm the Director of Hallidays HR, and this is my colleague Lizzie Walsh, giving us a wave. And she's our HR business partner. So I think quite a few of you will recognise our faces. For those of you that don't know, Hallidays HR is a HR training and financial recruitment consultancy based in Stockport, but we operate all over the Northwest and the UK. Okay, let's have a look at the agenda for today then. So over the next kind of 30 to 40 kind of minutes, we're going to be looking at tips for hosting a fun, safe, and inclusive celebration, what to plan beforehand, and how to keep things running smoothly on the day, how to tackle any issues gracefully if things don't go to plan, and then some other considerations at this festive time of year. But first, I've got a little Christmas poem for you from a HR perspective. So the Christmas party season is almost in full swing. The office closes early and you get the first round in. The fizz is flowing nicely and there's even party food. And the drinking games are helping to set the festive mood. Now Tim is in an argument with the guy behind the bar, and Sally's fumbling in her handbag for the keys to her new car. John is in a corner, leering drunkenly at Sharon, and no one has seen Nicola since she disappeared with Darren. It's Monday morning now, and the office feels quite odd. Emma isn't in yet, and Sally's in with Rod. His face is just like thunder, and Sally is in tears. I wonder what they're saying, if only walls had ears. Now Tim's arrived with coffee and a bruise around his eye. He's acting really sheepish. Didn't even come say hi. I asked him how the party went. Did he dance away the night? He mumbled something to himself about some sort of fight. HR have been to speak to Rod. His mood is even worse. And at the weekly meeting, his manner was quite terse. Poor Rod is taking all the flack. He doesn't have much luck. And now he's seen the photos that have appeared on Facebook. Like a champ, you would take it with a smile on your face, knowing you were the glue that held things in place. By the end of the day, all would be as it should, all the drama reduced, all infractions made good. And flipping the switch, you would yell in the night, another holiday bash averted, another year I was right. So on that note, let's start off on a positive note and look at some of the benefits of a Christmas party. Because at the end of the day, it is all about having fun. So it's obviously about that celebration. So, perhaps more than anything else, Christmas period is a time for celebration. So whether it's for religious reasons or simply to allow employees to kind of let their hair down in that, that informal way, Christmas is a really great time for employers to show appreciation and that recognition. It can build employee morale. So it serves as a really great opportunity for teams to celebrate all their hard work throughout the course of the year and to come together, to bond in that mutual appreciation. Commending your employees on their achievements can have a huge impact on their overall outlook, job satisfaction and motivation for the coming year. It fosters team building. So, that whole celebrating together. And workplace parties can provide, a really nice, relaxing setting for employees to socialize, to strengthen relationships with each other, And these interactions can lead to that whole improved teamwork and collaboration in the workplace. It enhances employer-employee relationships. So, obviously gives you as managers, as employers, that chance to kind of interact on that informal basis with your employees. Um, it can help to bridge that gap between the hierarchical levels, to remove those kind of barriers, and allow you to be like a bit more kind of, relatable, I guess, in terms of the eyes of the employees. So it's all about enhancing these relationships and about making, sure that your employees feel valued. As the saying goes, I'm sure you've heard, is that, valued employees are likelier to be engaged employees, and employees that are engaged are more committed to their work and the business as a whole. So, it boosts that whole productivity, and reducing that turnover in the process. So, when done right, Christmas parties can have all of the above benefits and more. Um, but, critical to the success, it's all in the planning. So, in the words of Benjamin Franklin, by failing to prepare, you're preparing to fail. So, what is it that we need to think about in advance then around the Christmas party? So, first off, I guess you need to look at the timing and the location side of things. So, it's about selecting an appropriate date and venue. So, obviously, that's a basic, but an absolute must. Checking on that employee availability, considering the travel logistics, and if you've got, accessibility for any of your team members. It's one thing that you just can't afford to overlook. And within this aspect alone, there are, a few pitfalls. So, it's not a great feeling for, one person who happens to be left out because the time or the place aren't suitable. So, take the feelings and the considerations of all your employees into account before you kind of take the plunge. And this way you can obviously avoid that kind of costly social faux pas, if you like, and ensure that everybody is included. Then you might look at themes and activities. So you might decide, that there is a theme for your Christmas party. And it's a really good idea. It can create an element of fun, of excitement, and can be like a playful element that kind of unites your workforce and makes it, that little bit different. However, that said, just be mindful of the cultural and the religious sensibilities, of your employees when selecting a particular theme. So avoid things that could potentially be considered as offensive or, exclude certain people, and ensure that it is kind of suitable for everyone and in line with the company culture. And if you really want to go the extra mile, you can even plan in some games and some contests and things like that to, add in that kind of additional fun level. Gives you that kind of friendly competition, if you like. And then I guess, the other thing to think about is budget, and, making sure that, obviously it's within your budget from a company point of view. Looking at well ahead of time to avoid any kind of complications or those additional costs. But also important to note that it might have additional budget implications for your team members and your employees as well. So, for example, if you have gone for a Christmas jumper theme or a fancy dress theme, make sure that you're kind of, aware that not every employee has the same amount of disposable cash to hand. And just think about that. Is it something that you might want to support in terms of funding, or just make it kind of, I guess, potentially quite cheap and cheerful, for that reason. Okay, so let's just look at the night itself. So, it's a tricky one, isn't it? You need to get the balance right between facilitating a really good time for everyone, but also not encouraging that excessive drinking. It is a work do after all. And as part of this, it's also, for people who don't drink. So, making sure that it's comfortable for them, making sure that there's soft drinks available. And, ideally, what we'd recommend is that, if you can have one senior person that does stay sober or sober-ish, so that they can kind of monitor the behavior in real time. And should, any kind of issues come to light on the night, there's somebody that can handle those. Obviously, keep in mind your own conduct too. So there's been lots of occasions when a boss who's had too much to drink has maybe promised a pay rise or something like that, or has kind of had loose lips, if you like, on the night, and kind of went on to regret it the next day. So just factored that in as well. So, for all the fun that is had, though, one survey that was conducted a few years ago found that 1 in 10 people had been disciplined or even dismissed for misbehaving at the office Christmas party. And of those, another 8% had handed in their notice after feeling they could no longer work with their colleagues. Now, we're not sure whether that was due to their own behaviour or a co-worker's behaviour, but I imagine it's probably a bit of a mix of the two. But that's a pretty big figure, to be honest, that 8%. So, left unchecked, and especially if fueled by too much alcohol, there's really that heightened risk of excessive drinking, drug use, even arguments and fighting. There might be harassment or sexual harassment. There could be damage to property. So it might be in your office. It might be in, obviously in the, in a function room, a bar, whatever. You might have the risk of drink driving, social media misuse, people not getting home safely, and potentially also unauthorized absence the following day as well. But the good news is, though, that, with a bit of preparation, you can significantly reduce the risk of any of these things happening. And I'm just going to hand over to Lizzie now, who's going to, look at some of the steps that you can take to kind of reduce those risks.
Thanks, Liz. So yeah, first things first, it is about setting those expectations. It's crucial to set clear guidelines for behaviour. And I think one of the main ones is about reminding your employees that the office Christmas party is an extension of the workplace. So, all the company rules, therefore your policies and procedures also apply. And it's about emphasising that any misconduct could lead to formal disciplinary action. With regards to drinking, you might want to consider exercising caution when it comes to an open bar. Yes, absolutely, it is a really generous thing to do to provide free drinks, but obviously offering a variety of non-alcoholic options is equally important. You could even consider using drink tokens to monitor alcohol consumption and prevent that excessive indulgence. And Liz mentioned it literally just now, but one of the topics which can occur at Christmas parties is sexual harassment. And I guess that could be either verbal or physical. It can even include something as simple as commenting on somebody's clothing or appearance, but if taken the wrong way, there can be consequences. And given the presence of alcohol and the misconception that the party doesn't count as work, people, they let their hair down, don't they? They can forget themselves and at times behave highly inappropriately, particularly if tensions have been simmering during the year, or, you've had a really busy, stressful year end and things just finally come to a head. And those inhibitions can certainly be lowered with the addition of alcohol. We then have the beauty of social media, and that can definitely turn festivities into a PR nightmare if not managed properly. So it's all about establishing those guidelines about what can and cannot be shared online. I've seen it where companies have had a specific hashtag that they've encouraged people to use so that it allows you to be able to monitor shared content. But you can certainly request the removal of any inappropriate posts that could harm the company's reputation if they do come to light. We've of course then got absence, and the holiday season certainly sees a spike in absenteeism. So to counter this, some companies, they might consider scheduling the party on a Friday, providing employees a weekend to recuperate. If your event falls on a weekday, then just be sure to set expectations for the following work day. So it might be that, it's a work from home day if that can be accommodated, or it might be that people can, come in a little bit later if they, need to make sure that they're well rested and not at any risk of drink driving. Ultimately, it's about reminding your employees that if they want a day off the next working day, yeah, great, but they should be booking it as annual leave if that's available to them, and the unauthorised absence certainly isn't acceptable. It's also worthwhile checking that you've got up-to-date disciplinary and grievance policies, because these are what are going to underpin how you handle any complaints, how you look at, any misconduct or gross misconduct allegations, what your process is in terms of dealing with those. And the Worker Protection Act actually puts heightened responsibilities on employers to prevent harassment and sexual harassment, and that actually came into force in October last year. So again, something else that does need to be reflected in your policies. And what we're seeing now is, as a result of that Protection Act, many companies are choosing to run training to educate employees and ultimately aid their compliance with this law. So this is something that Halliday's HR that we can do. There are obviously also, e-learning and whatnot. So I just want to share a few cases that I've found on Google that have resulted in people being dismissed and an employment tribunal deeming it a fair dismissal, while you watch this gentleman photograph his whatever it is that he's doing. So first up, we've got Gimson versus Display by Design Limited. So this was a case where an employee was fairly dismissed for punching a colleague while walking home from the party, and the tribunal found that the incident was still sufficiently connected to their employment. There's then the case of Coordinate versus Virgin Media Limited. So a dismissal for racially and sexually offensive language and sexually harassing a colleague at the party was found to be fair. Jones versus MBNA. So this was considered fair to dismiss one employee for a scuffle at the Christmas party. There's Bellman versus Northampton Recruitment Limited. So the employer was held vicariously liable for a senior manager's assault on another employee at a hotel bar after the official party, as again the court found that the event was still in the course of employment. And we've got Nixon versus Ross Coat Solicitors. So this is a situation where an employee resigned and claimed constructive dismissal after becoming pregnant, leading to gossip and speculation about the father of the baby following an incident at the Christmas party. And some of those companies, in all fairness, you're probably likely to have heard of. So it's certainly really important to ensure that you do things right. I think the clear message there is that at the end of the day, it is an extension of employment, any social event, not just the Christmas party. I also want to cover off some of the most common festive HR challenges in the workplace, along with some tips on how to avoid them or deal with any potential fallout. So it may be that your business is in the retail or hospitality sector. So, you may be in full flow and peak season with everybody rushed off their feet. And actually, according to the Bank of England, the average UK household spends an additional £713 extra in December in comparison to other months. And many other sectors, though, perhaps experience a bit of a quieter time as demand tails off. But whichever is true for you, I guess there is, a range of HR challenges around Christmas that you may have to deal with. So First up is Secret Santa spoilers. So, of course, Secret Santa is a fun way to get in the Christmas spirit, but it does need to be managed carefully. So, you don't want people feeling excluded. We've probably all given or received an inappropriate gift. There's plenty that can and does go wrong, I guess. So, maybe setting expectations in terms of whoever's organising it should ensure that everybody has the opportunity to take part, even if they don't celebrate Christmas, and equally that it's fine to opt out. It might be sensible to consider setting a budget, we hear of like £5, £10 these days for Secret Santas, and again, taking into account that money may be tight at this time of year. Even if people are not necessarily telling you that. And I would also advise reminding the team to be respectful of boundaries with the gifts, because I guess it's all about perception, and what one person considers funny might actually be offensive to somebody else. And I guess unusual staffing levels is something else that potentially, we see at this time of year. And I guess it depends on your business. So, some businesses may actually be contending with skeleton staff for one reason or another, whereas others might actually be hiring in, seasonal workers and dishing out overtime like glitter. If it is really quiet, you may consider a seasonal shutdown, which is absolutely fine, but you just need to ensure that, if you want to enforce your employees take holidays, you need to be making sure that you give them notice. And legally, that needs to be double the amount of time that you want them to take off. So if you're asking me to take 2 days holiday, that's fine, but you need to give me 4 days notice. That's good maths for me, to be fair. If you are very busy, obviously keep in mind the working time regulations, and it's 48-hour maximum working week. Again, opt-outs are in place, so just consider that. It is over an average of 17 weeks, but, times can be busy. And if you do have temporary workers, they still need a contract of some description. They still need to be inducted and trained and whatnot. So yes, okay, they might only be with you for a few weeks, but there's still an obligation to set them up to succeed. And I guess with all the fun that comes at Christmas, employees can sometimes get a little bit distracted, a little bit of online shopping, turning up worse for wear after a night out, maybe even trying to pull a sickie. But at the end of the day, you still have got a business to run, and rightly so expect certain levels of productivity. And I guess there can be varying degrees of misbehaviour, and hopefully most of them can be nipped in the bud with a quiet word. But of course, if that, persistence is there, or ultimately they do something that breaches your policies and your procedures, then that's where your disciplinary policy should guide you in how to respond. If not, we certainly can help on that matter. And we've already covered Secret Santa gifting, but what I just want to talk about is another type of present, I guess, that can sometimes cause issues, and that's potentially those that might be given by clients, customers, suppliers, and whatnot. So yes, they're absolutely great for individuals to receive. It really shows that recognition that, somebody has provided a good service, but it is important that, more generous gifts are not seen to influence any commercial decisions. So we would recommend keeping a register if you don't already, asking employees to declare gifts perhaps over a certain value. Token gesture, perhaps you might say, do you know what, it's okay for you to keep, but maybe anything over £20, for example, they need to declare it. Because I guess sometimes team harmony can be affected. If one person receiving a mountain of gifts from, a number of clients or customers, that might get the backs up of other people. So maybe find a way to be able to share them around so everybody feels appreciated. So, top tips then to ensure that you survive your Christmas party and the period leading up to the big day. You may even have had your Christmas party. I know of a few people that have put the tree up already, and I am desperate to get mine. So, Top tips then, get involved early in planning, review and update those relevant policies, promote inclusion and safety, communicate clearly and positively, and balance fun with responsibility. Because most of all, we want you to have fun. But yeah, there's a bit to take in there. You may already have some things considered. You may be keen to explore some of the other options. We can, of course, help with everything that we've talked about today, whether it's as a HR client or either on a project basis. But if there are any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or drop us a message at the end of this presentation or our contact details, and we will indeed share you a copy of the recording and the PowerPoint so that you've got that. But yeah, any questions, pop them in the chat. If not, from all of us at Halliday's HR, we hope you have fun on your Christmas party and that by following the tips, you'll be well on your way to keeping trouble to a minimum. We got any questions? Oh, thanks, Holly.
No, nothing that I can see.
No? Okay.
No.
Well,
Right. Have a good one, everyone.
Enjoy. Thanks, Eleanor.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.